Why was everyone ignoring her at the briefing table? No, this wasn't a war zone anymore. Not the kind she used to know. It was a modern office with soft fluorescent light, humming printers, and the faint smell of burnt coffee. But to Sarah Martinez, every sound still carried weight. Every movement still mapped itself on an invisible tactical grid in her mind. 3 months. That's how long it had been since she traded battlefields for cubicles, night vision for computer screens, and classified missions for debugging code. 3 months of trying to breathe like a civilian again. At 32, Sarah blended in so well that even the security cameras seemed to forget she existed. Shoulder-length brown hair tied back, plain gray blouse, dark jeans. The kind of person your eyes slide over in a crowd. She preferred it that way. She, once been trained to disappear in deserts, jungles, and city ruins. Disappearing among ordinary people was just another skill, the one that came with a strange kind of ache. No one here knew that Sarah Martinez wasn't her real name. No one here knew she'd ever worn a trident patch on her shoulder. And no one here would believe it if she told them. She ate lunch alone every day at the same small table in the far corner of the cafeteria. It was the quietest spot, half-shadowed, out of the main traffic line between the food counter and the seating area. That was where she could breathe without pretending to belong. She'd bring the same paperback novel, a half-finished turkey sandwich, and sit with her back to the wall. Old habits die hardest. There was safety in solitude, but solitude can also make you visible in a way attention never could. The chatter of the room blurred into one continuous hum, voices bouncing off tile and steel. Somewhere a microwave beeped. Someone laughed too loudly. Sarah turned a page, eyes scanning lines she wasn't really reading. The story in the book didn't matter. What mattered was that it kept people from trying to talk to her. It had taken months for her nervous system to stop expecting the sudden blast of a distant explosion, the coded radio whisper before chaos. But some instincts never dulled. Even now, she still sat facing the door, still cataloged exits, still knew which table legs could be snapped off fast enough to become weapons. And so when three shadows broke away from the cafeteria crowd and began walking toward her table, she knew before she looked up. 3 trainees, young, restless, and full of that fragile confidence that comes from never having been tested. She'd seen them before, always together, always too loud. The tallest one, Brad, moved like someone who'd never been told no for long enough to wonder what it might mean. His hair was perfect, his watch expensive. He wore arrogance like a cologne. The second, heavier, broad-shouldered, arms that strained his company-issued polo. The kind who lived at the gym but never once considered endurance beyond his own reflection. The third trailed half a step behind, glancing around as if searching for an escape route he already knew he wouldn't take. Sarah didn't look up immediately. She turned another page, her expression neutral, her breathing steady. She let her senses widen, counting distances, timing footsteps, not out of fear. Reflex. The kind of quiet readiness that had once saved lives. Her body understood danger even when her mind told her this was just a workplace. "Excuse me," a voice said, loud enough to pull attention from nearby tables. She looked up slowly. Brad was smiling the way people do when they're trying to hide cruelty behind charm. "We couldn't help but notice," he said. "You always sit here alone. Same table, same book. Don't you have any friends here?" A small laugh rippled from the other two. Sarah's gaze didn't waver. She let silence hang between them long enough for his smile to falter. Then she said simply, "I prefer eating alone." Her voice was calm, controlled, unthreatening, but not submissive. The kind of voice that carried more discipline than most people could understand. "That's kinda sad, don't you think?" the stocky one added, grinning. "What's wrong with you, antisocial or something?" A flicker of discomfort passed over the third trainee's face, but he said nothing. Social gravity held him in place. The need to belong, stronger than conscience. Sarah took a deliberate bite of her sandwich, chewed slowly. Didn't break eye contact. Silence again, stretching thin. The room had begun to quiet. People were watching now, the way people always watch when someone being cornered and they don't want to admit it. Brad leaned closer. It's rude to ignore people when they're being friendly. Friendly? She almost smiled at the word. She met friendlier men in interrogation rooms. I appreciate your concern, she said evenly, but I'm quite content with my lunch arrangements. It should have ended there. A polite deflection, but Brad's cheeks flushed, pride twisting into something uglier. Around them, conversation died entirely. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to fade. He raised his voice. You know what I think? I think you're scared. Scared that if anyone actually got to know you, they'd realize there's nothing interesting about you. Some people fight wars with guns, others with words meant to wound where bullets can't. Sarah put down her water bottle, slowly, carefully. Then she looked up at him, really looked. Calm eyes, flat expression, no anger, no fear. But inside, something old stirred. That pulse of awareness that came right before a mission went bad. Her muscles didn't tense, yet every fiber was awake, waiting. The stocky one joined in. Maybe she's mute or something, mentally defective. A few gasps, a phone camera clicked. The boyish laughter of cruelty echoed in the silence that followed. Sarah stood. The motion was quiet, fluid. Years of training compressed into one effortless rise. She was shorter than Brad, yet the air shifted as though she'd grown taller. Presence. That was what command had called it. The invisible weight that could make a room obey before a word was spoken. I think you gentlemen have made your point, she said softly. Perhaps it would be best if you returned to your table. Brad smirked. Oh, now she talks. What's wrong? Realized people are watching. The third trainee whispered, Brad, maybe we should. Shut up, Kevin, Brad snapped, not looking away from her. He didn't realize the mistake he'd just made. He was standing too close. Her left side clear, right side blocked only by a chair. No threat. She could have neutralized all three in under 7 seconds. She did the math without meaning to. Old habits resurfacing like ghosts. You know what your problem is, Brad continued, louder now, desperate to prove control. You think you're better than everyone else, sitting here with your little book, acting all mysterious. But really, you're a nobody. Sarah tilted her head, studying him as if analyzing a riddle. And what exactly would you like me to do about that? He blinked. He hadn't expected curiosity. He'd expected tears or anger or retreat. Instead, she stood there, quiet, unreadable, like someone who'd already survived worse than he could imagine. I want you to admit it, he said, voice cracking just slightly. Admit that you're scared, that you don't belong here. The cafeteria was silent now. Even the security guard near the door had frozen mid-step. Dozens of phones raised, eyes wide. And Sarah felt something she hadn't in months, the deep, focused stillness before action. You're waiting for me to break down, she said, tone still gentle. You want me to cry or get angry, right? That's what this is about. Brad's smile returned. Finally, the real you. The real me, she echoed softly. Most people don't actually want to see the real me. They think they do, but they don't. What's that supposed to mean? The stocky one asked, trying to sound brave. Sarah's expression didn't change. It means that sometimes when you push people to show you who they really are, you might not like what you find. The tension tightened like wire. Brad laughed, but the sound broke halfway through. Oh, I'm so scared, he said, stepping closer. What are you going to do, bore me to death? Sarah smiled, just a small curl of the lips, but it froze all three where they stood. It wasn't pleasant. It wasn't warm. It was the kind of smile that said she'd already measured them, weighed them, and decided what she would do if things went 1 inch further. You know what's funny, she whispered. You remind me of people I used to know. Different uniforms, same mentality. Bullies who mistake cruelty for strength. Kevin swallowed hard. What are you talking about? I'm talking about the kind of people who think power comes from making others small. Her voice lowered, each word deliberate. The kind who prey on what they think is weakness because they've never met real strength. The guard was moving now, cutting through the tables, but the crowd was silent, transfixed. You wanted to see the real me, Sarah said. Here's a little preview. She stepped forward, one step. The air changed, a ripple of something primal. All three men instinctively stepped back. The real me doesn't scare easy, she said. The real me stood eye-to-eye with men who had bombs strapped to their chests. The real me has buried teammates whose names you'll never know. So no, Brad, I'm not scared of you. Brad tried to laugh, but the sound came out wrong, half cough, half panic. You're crazy. Maybe, she replied lightly. But you just spent 10 minutes trying to humiliate someone, and you have no idea who you're dealing with. The guard reached them, panting. All right, what's going on here? Sarah didn't even look at him. Her eyes never left Brad's. These gentlemen were expressing concern about my social habits, she said politely. That's not, she was being weird and threatening. Brad's words stumbled over themselves. Threats, Sarah repeated, turning to the room. Did anyone hear me make threats? Silence, a few heads shook. She smiled faintly. No, then perhaps we should all get back to lunch. But Brad couldn't let it go. She said we didn't want to threaten her. That's a threat. No, Sarah said softly. That's advice. Even the security guard blinked, caught between confusion and awe. Around the room, people were whispering, phones still recording. Look, maybe everyone should just, the guard began. Actually, Sarah interrupted gently, I think these gentlemen have something they'd like to say first. Dozens of eyes turned to Brad and his friends. The pressure was visible now, sweat gathering at their temples. What had started as a show of dominance was slipping into humiliation. Brad's voice faltered. We were just. Just what? She asked, her tone calm as an ocean before a storm. Kevin exhaled, defeated. We were trying to be friendly. Friendly? Sarah echoed. Is that what you call it when you surround someone eating alone and call them pathetic? Silence stretched again, heavy, suffocating. Around the cafeteria, realization was dawning on faces. The laughter, the smirks, they were gone now, replaced by shame. Brad muttered, we didn't mean. Oh, I think you did, Sarah said quietly. The question is what you'll do about it now. The guard looked uncertain, as though waiting for her to give him permission to act. HR can sort it out, he offered weakly. Sarah nodded. Of course, I'm sure HR would love to hear how their training program participants spend lunch. That landed like a grenade. Brad's face drained of color. Wait, maybe we can work this out. How, she asked, by pretending it didn't happen. We could apologize, he said finally, the words tasting like metal. That's a start. The stocky one blurted, we're sorry, okay, we didn't mean. You didn't mean to corner a woman and call her defective, she pressed. That just happened by accident. Kevin spoke again, voice trembling but sincere. We were being jerks, showing off we're sorry. Sarah studied him for a beat, then nodded. Thank you, Kevin, that's honest. She looked to the other two, and you. Brad's jaw worked, pride warring with self-preservation. We're sorry for harassing you, for being jerks. Sarah's expression softened. See, that wasn't so hard. She let her voice carry, clear, calm, resonant. I forgive you. Relief flickered across their faces, but something deeper moved behind her eyes. A current of thought she didn't voice yet. She turned, scanning the room, every face, every phone still lifted. Her next words were measured, but they cut through the air like a blade. You see, these gentlemen made some assumptions about me, she began. They saw someone quiet, someone alone, and they thought that made me weak. But people often confuse quiet with fear. They mistake solitude for loneliness. Sometimes people are quiet for very good reasons. Her gaze returned to Brad, steady, unwavering. And sometimes, she said softly, it's the quiet ones you should never provoke. She stood there motionless, the cafeteria's silence pressing against her like the weight of 1,000 memories. Every eye was on her, every phone still recording. And for a brief second, Sarah thought of how absurd it was, that, after years of surviving war zones, she now stood in a brightly lit cafeteria being filmed by people who'd never even heard a gunshot outside of a movie. Her instinct whispered, "End it cleanly, de-escalate." Her body, though, that old trained thing that never quite forgot the field, wanted something else. To speak, to reclaim her dignity without raising a single hand. To remind these boys and everyone else that strength doesn't always wear a uniform. She inhaled once, slow and steady. Then she spoke, her voice quiet but carrying to every corner. "Before I became a software developer," she said, "I had a different career, a very different career." A murmur rippled through the room. Brad blinked. What's that supposed to mean? Sarah didn't answer him directly. Her eyes drifted, unfocused, as if seeing something that no one else could. Dust, heat, the shimmer of a distant horizon that wasn't made of office tiles. "For 12 years," she continued, "I served in the United States Navy, and for the last 8 of those years, I was part of a very small, very specialized unit." The words hung in the air like a sudden chill. She saw the disbelief first, the instinctive smirk on Brad's face, the quiet scoff from the stocky one. Then the confusion. Then, finally, the dawning realization. A whisper from the back of the room. She said SEAL. Sarah nodded once. "We called ourselves SEALs." For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then the room erupted, gasps, half-formed questions, someone muttering, "No way." The sound swelled like the rising tide of shock and awe. Brad's smirk faded. The stocky trainee's jaw dropped. Kevin, the only one who'd seemed remotely human through the whole ordeal, took a small step backward as though the air itself had changed density. Sarah let them process it. She wasn't looking for applause. She wasn't trying to humiliate anyone. She just wanted them to understand, really understand, what they'd been standing in front of. "I know what you're thinking," she said after a moment. "You think Navy SEALs are supposed to be big, muscular men with tattoos and loud voices, and many of them are. But special operations aren't about size or noise. They're about precision, about calm, about the ability to act when others freeze." She turned slightly, addressing the room now, not the boys, not the guard, but the silent circle of coworkers who had pretended not to see what was happening minutes earlier. "Sometimes," she said, "the most dangerous people are the ones you never notice." The security guard was standing stiffly beside her now, trying to look authoritative but clearly out of his depth. His hand hovered near his radio, unsure whether to use it or salute. Sarah's gaze softened just a little. "During my time in the field, I completed 43 missions across 6 countries, hostage rescues, counterterrorism, reconnaissance behind enemy lines." Her tone didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I was trained in 17 forms of close-quarters combat, qualified on 26 different weapons systems, and I've been shot twice, stabbed once. I survived a helicopter crash in Afghanistan." Her eyes found Brad again, not with anger but with something far heavier, pity. "So no," she said quietly, "I'm not scared of 3 trainees who think harassment is funny." Brad's face was pale now. The color drained out as though his body had finally understood what his mind refused to believe. The stocky one's hand was trembling. Kevin stared at her like he was seeing an entirely different person. And maybe he was. Because in that moment, the mask she'd worn, the quiet, forgettable woman who sat alone, cracked open just enough for the truth to leak through. But truth, once seen, never fits neatly back inside the shell it came from. You didn't know, she said softly. Of course you didn't. That was the point. I wanted anonymity. I wanted peace. After 12 years of operations where every mistake could cost lives, I wanted to eat my lunch without a mission briefing in my head. Her voice faltered for the first time, not from weakness, but from something deeper, weariness, the kind that no amount of rest could ever erase. But training like that, she went on, it doesn't leave you. You learn to read danger like most people read headlines. You learn to see the punch before it's thrown, the intention before it's spoken. The room was utterly still. Even the hum of the air conditioning seemed to wait for her next word. Brad opened his mouth, maybe to apologize again, but she raised a hand, not harshly, just a simple motion that silenced him instantly. The reflex of command. He obeyed without thinking. The only reason this ended with words, she said, is because I chose to let it end that way. Not because you scared me, not because I didn't know what to do, but because I decided that peace, even fragile peace, was worth more than pride. She took a step closer. He flinched. When you've spent years facing people who actually want to kill you, she continued softly, corporate bullies stop seeming impressive. You're not scary, Brad. You're just sad. Something broke in him at that. The posture, the cocky stance gone. He looked smaller, like someone who'd suddenly realized the difference between courage and cruelty. Sarah turned to the security guard. We're done here, she said. They've apologized. I've accepted it. Unless someone wants to file a formal complaint, I suggest we all get back to work. The guard nodded too quickly. Yes, ma'am, of course. Sarah bent down, picked up her half-eaten sandwich, her book, her water bottle. The simple, unhurried motions of someone who controlled the tempo of her own world. At the doorway she paused and looked back. Her eyes swept the room, a sea of stunned faces, open mouths, raised phones. Her voice was calm, but carried the kind of weight that could only come from truth. For those curious about my background, she said, I'd appreciate if you kept it within the company. I really do value my privacy. She let that sink in. And for everyone else, remember this. You never really know who you're dealing with. The person sitting quietly in the corner might be quiet for reasons you can't imagine. Then she turned and walked out, leaving behind a silence so profound it felt sacred. For a long time, no one moved. Then the whispers began, first as soft as breath, then spreading like wildfire. By the time she reached her desk on the 4th floor, the story had already outrun her. She could feel the eyes, the hushed voices, the not-so-subtle glances over cubicle walls. When she sat down and opened her laptop, her reflection flickered faintly in the dark screen, not the soldier she'd been, not quite the woman she was trying to become. Something in between. Her hands hovered over the keyboard, but she couldn't focus. The code on her monitor blurred. Behind her, whispers bled through the white noise of the office. Did you see the video? She's really a SEAL. My brother says women can't even qualify. Well, someone forgot to tell her. Sarah sighed. She lived through drone strikes and mortar fire, but this was the kind of exposure she couldn't defend against. Her phone buzzed, unknown number. She ignored it, then another buzz. This time a text. Holy crap, Sarah, you're viral. 50,000 views already. Jenny from marketing. Viral. Her stomach tightened. She grabbed her phone, searched, and felt her pulse climb with each result. 6 different videos, dozens of reposts, hundreds of comments. Each version had a title more sensational than the last. Mysterious woman humiliates harassers, then drops shocking truth. Ex-Navy SEAL destroys corporate bullies. The internet had turned her into a symbol she never asked to be. Her heart pounded the way it used to before a mission, except there was no mission now. No control, no exit plan. Then came the shadow, the subtle shift of light across her desk. She looked up to see Tom Williams, her supervisor. He wore that careful expression of someone who's about to say something they wish they didn't have to. "Sarah," he said gently, "can I see you in my office?" She followed him through the maze of cubicles. Dozens of eyes followed them, not all hostile, some admiring, some uncertain, some simply afraid. In his glass-walled office, Tom shut the door. The sounds of the floor faded. "I hear there was some excitement in the cafeteria," he began awkwardly. Sarah gave a small, humorless smile. "You could say that. I've had calls from HR, legal, and the executive floor. Everyone wants to know what happened. I told them what the videos showed, that you were being harassed and handled it without violence, which is true." He hesitated. "The problem is the story spreading fast. Reporters are already calling, asking if we employ a former Navy SEAL." Sarah's fingers tightened around the armrest of her chair. "And what does that mean for my employment?" Tom sighed. "It means we need to figure out how to handle the attention. Legally, you're fine. Nobody thinks you did anything wrong, but our PR team's concerned." "Concerned," she repeated flatly. He turned his computer screen toward her. A video was playing, one of the clips from the cafeteria. The view counter blinked upward in real time. 210,000, 211,000, 212,000. This one's being shared by veteran groups, women's organizations, news outlets. You're trending on social media. It's good PR for the company in some ways, but also unpredictable. Her chest tightened again. That old, familiar constriction she used to feel before going dark behind enemy lines, when one wrong move could expose everything. "I need to make some calls," she said finally. Tom nodded. "Take the rest of the day off, tomorrow too if you need it." She stood to leave. At the door she paused. "I never wanted this, Tom. I just wanted to do my job, eat lunch in peace." He gave a weary half-smile. "I believe you, but sometimes life doesn't ask what we want, does it?" That night her apartment felt foreign. Same walls, same furniture, same city skyline outside her window, but everything felt smaller, or maybe she had outgrown it in a single day. She set down her bag, walked straight to the small black case on her kitchen counter and opened it. Inside was a secure satellite phone, her last tie to the life she'd left behind. She hesitated, then dialed a number she hadn't called in years. 2 rings. A voice firm, measured, familiar. "Well," Admiral Rebecca Martinez said, "I was wondering when you'd reach out. I assume you've seen the videos." Sarah exhaled, eyes closing. "You've seen them too." "Half the Pentagon has," the Admiral replied dryly. "You're quite the internet sensation." "How bad is it?" 2 million views as of this morning. "Congratulations, Lieutenant Commander. You just became the face of about 6 trending topics." Sarah sank onto her couch. "Admiral, how does this affect my status, my records, my clearance?" "You didn't reveal anything classified," the Admiral said. "That's the good news. The bad news: you've just been drafted into a war you didn't choose, public opinion." Sarah laughed once bitterly. "I wanted peace." "You earned it," Martinez said softly. "But peace, like freedom, comes with a price." The line went silent for a long moment. Then the Admiral said quietly, "The question now, Sarah, is what you'll do with it." Sarah stared at the city lights outside her window. She didn't have an answer yet. Only the feeling, deep, familiar, inescapable, that a new mission had already begun. What does a soldier do when the battlefield follows her home? Sarah had faced firestorms before, but never like this. This one burned quietly, across screens and headlines, in the invisible realm of public judgment. By morning, her name, her real name, or at least the one the world thought was real, was everywhere. Former Navy SEAL confronts workplace bullies. Woman humiliates harassers with calm precision. Corporate America meets special operations. Each headline twisted the truth, just enough to make it entertaining. She hadn't wanted fame. Fame was exposure. Exposure was danger. As she brewed her morning coffee, the news anchor's voice filled her apartment. Viral video believed to show a female Navy SEAL standing up to workplace harassment. While the Pentagon hasn't confirmed her identity, the footage has sparked nationwide discussion. Sarah muted the TV and stood there, staring at her reflection in the dark screen. There she was in civilian clothes, hair down, no weapons, no team, but she could still see traces of the other woman, the one who used to move through shadows and never needed to explain herself. Her phone buzzed again, unknown number. She ignored it. Then another. And another. The fifth one she answered. Sarah Martinez. The voice was crisp, professional. "This is Claire Walters with Channel 9 News. We'd like to." She hung up. 2 minutes later, another call. This time from someone named Luke, then another from a veterans magazine, then from a talk show producer. By the fourth hour, she turned her phone off completely. But silence had never felt so loud. She walked to her balcony. The city below pulsed with life. Cars, lights, voices, thousands of lives moving forward without knowing that somewhere above them stood a woman trying to stay invisible again. Her phone lit up once more, this time the secure one, the one that never rang without reason. She answered before the second tone. "Sarah," said the familiar voice of Marcus Chen, her old teammate, calm, steady, with that hint of humor he used to hide exhaustion. "You just broke the internet." She closed her eyes. "Marcus, I know you didn't plan this, but damn Martinez, that was legendary. Don't start." Too late. Half the team's seen the videos. Even Rodriguez. She said she nearly spit out her coffee when you dropped the "I was a SEAL" line. Despite herself, Sarah smiled. "How are they all?" "Alive, busy, old," he hesitated, "and proud. You should know that. You handled those idiots with more discipline than most of us would have." Sarah exhaled slowly. "This was supposed to be my quiet life, Marcus. No cameras, no interviews, no missions." "Yeah," he said gently, "but the thing about quiet lives, they have a way of waking up." There was a long pause between them, the kind that carried weight. Then Marcus spoke again, voice softer. "Listen, I've been following the online chatter. Some people are calling you a hero. Others," he hesitated, "others are saying women can't be SEALs." Sarah felt the words hit somewhere deep, not like a bullet, more like a bruise pressed too often. Let them talk. They're not just talking, they're demanding proof of your service. They think you're a fraud. Her hands clenched unconsciously. Years of earning respect through sweat and silence, reduced to hashtags and arguments from strangers who'd never even worn boots. Marcus continued. "A few of us have been speaking up, posting where it matters. Rodriguez shared a story about that op in Syria, the one you saved our asses on." "Marcus," she warned gently. "What? It's not classified. The details are vague enough. People should know who they're trying to tear down." But Sarah shook her head even though he couldn't see it. "That's not why I did it. I didn't want this fight." He sighed. "You might not have a choice anymore." She closed her eyes. The war she thought she'd left was changing shape again. No weapons, no borders, just perception and reputation. After they hung up, Sarah sat in the stillness of her apartment, staring at the soft hum of the city beyond her window. She thought of the words Admiral Martinez had said the night before. Peace comes with a price. Maybe this was the price. By noon, her inbox overflowed. Emails from journalists, veterans, organizations, even a few movie producers. But mixed among them was one that made her stop. The subject line read, "From one soldier to another." She opened it. "Ms. Martinez, I know you've probably had more attention than you ever wanted, but I wanted to thank you. Watching you stand your ground reminded me of who I used to be before PTSD made me doubt myself. For the first time in years, I didn't feel ashamed. I just wanted you to know that your silence spoke louder than any speech. Mark D. USMC read. Sarah read it twice, then 3 times. Her throat tightened. She'd been called many things in her life: soldier, operative, asset, but not inspiration. That word felt heavier than any mission. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. She almost ignored it, then something told her to pick up. "Ms. Martinez," a woman's voice said. "My name's Diana Rodriguez. I'm with the Veterans Advocacy Network." Sarah tensed. "If this is about interviews." "Oh no," the voice interrupted warmly. "I'm not a reporter. I'm a veteran too. Army Special Operations. We help former service members transition into civilian life. I wanted to talk about what's happening and maybe what comes next." Sarah hesitated. "What comes next?" "Right now, your story, resonating with a lot of women," Diana said. "Veterans who have been through harassment, people who have felt invisible. They're seeing you and they're finding courage in that." Sarah rubbed her temple. "I didn't mean to start anything." "Neither did Rosa Parks," Diana said softly. "Sometimes the act you don't plan becomes the one that changes lives." Sarah didn't respond. She was too busy staring at the blacked-out phone screen, watching her reflection flicker faintly. She didn't feel like a symbol. She felt tired. But Diana's voice carried something steady, grounding. "Look, I know you didn't ask for this spotlight, but maybe we can turn it into something that matters. You wouldn't have to give interviews or chase fame. Just help us help others." "How?" "By being visible for once," Diana said. "By telling the truth about what it's like to come home and still be fighting, just in a different kind of battlefield." That line lingered. A different kind of battlefield. Sarah knew exactly what that meant. They talked for nearly an hour. Diana outlined programs, corporate workshops, veteran mentorships, outreach for women leaving active duty. Sarah listened, cautious but curious. By the end of the call, something unfamiliar stirred in her chest. Hope, or maybe purpose. They felt similar when they were new. After they hung up, Sarah sat in silence. The city outside glowed in late afternoon gold, the kind of light that reminded her of dust storms over foreign lands. She realized she hadn't felt this particular weight since her last mission, the weight of having a choice that mattered. The next day, she met Diana in person. They chose a small coffee shop downtown. No cameras, no reporters, just 2 veterans in plain clothes sharing a quiet table by the window. Diana was in her 40s, calm but fierce in her gaze, the kind of woman who'd fought her own wars and didn't need to prove it. "I read your personnel summary," Diana said after the first few minutes. "You were in Bravo Team, Task Unit Black. That's not light service." Sarah nodded. "A lifetime ago." "Doesn't feel that way, does it?" Diana smiled faintly. "It never does." Sarah looked out the window. "I wanted to disappear, live quietly. I thought I'd earned that." "You did," Diana said. "But sometimes the world has other plans. You didn't choose this story, but maybe you can choose what it becomes." Sarah was silent for a long time. The hum of the espresso machine filled the space between them. Finally she said, "If I do this, if I talk, it has to mean something. I won't sell my past." Diana nodded. "Good. Because what we need isn't another viral clip. We need voices that remind people that veterans don't stop serving when they take off the uniform." Sarah stared into her coffee cup. "You think anyone would listen?" "They already are," Diana said softly. "They just don't know what to do with what they're hearing." Sarah leaned back, her eyes distant. For the first time, she let herself imagine it, standing in front of a crowd again. Not with a rifle, not with a mission brief, but with words that might actually save someone. It scared her more than any operation she'd ever run. That night back in her apartment, she found herself rewatching the Cafeteria video, the full one. The angle from the far table captured everything. Her silence, their laughter, her calm voice, their unraveling. She watched her own eyes, the stillness, the patience, the quiet authority that had taken a decade to build. She realized that moment, that quiet moment, had reached millions not because she'd been loud, but because she hadn't been. Because she'd reminded people what control looks like. Not anger, not aggression, just the refusal to yield. She paused the video. Her reflection looked back at her, froze in mid-sentence. Then she whispered to herself, "If they're going to see me, they'll see the truth." The next morning she called Diana. "I'll do it," she said simply. Diana didn't sound surprised. "Good. I think you'll be helping more people than you know." That afternoon, Sarah wrote for the first time in years. Not code, not reports, just words. She wrote about transition, about quiet, about the things no one tells you when you take off the uniform, how the world feels too loud, too soft, too foreign all at once. She wrote about the feeling of being invisible and the danger of underestimating those who choose to be. When she stopped, it was midnight. On the screen in front of her was the first draft of a speech she didn't even know she was writing, the one she would give months later to a room full of veterans, CEOs, and students. It began simply with a single line. "Sometimes the battles we fight aren't about survival, they're about being seen." She sat back, reading the sentence over and over until the words blurred. For the first time since that day in the cafeteria, Sarah Martinez didn't feel like she was running from something. She felt like she was walking toward it. What happens when silence becomes a weapon and the world demands you speak? Sarah Martinez had spent her life mastering the art of invisibility, blending in, listening more than talking, waiting until the moment required action. But now, the one thing she'd always relied on, silence, had become the very thing she had to surrender. Her story had grown beyond her control. The video from the cafeteria had become a symbol for veterans, for women, for anyone who'd ever been underestimated. And symbols, she realized, are both powerful and dangerous. They stop belonging to the person who created them. 2 weeks after the video went viral, Sarah found herself sitting in a waiting room lined with cameras, microphones, and bright lights. A televised interview. Her first, and against every instinct she had. "You sure about this?" Diana Rodriguez asked, sitting across from her. She was the only person Sarah trusted enough to be here, the only one who hadn't tried to shape her story for clicks or applause. "No," Sarah said quietly, "but you were right. If I don't tell my own version, someone else will." Diana nodded. "Then make it yours." Sarah stared at her reflection in the dressing room mirror. The makeup artist had offered foundation and lipstick, but she declined. She didn't want to look polished. She wanted to look real. There were faint lines around her eyes now, the kind you earn through time and weather. Her hair was tied back. Simple, controlled. A producer knocked on the door. "We're ready for you." The lights on the set were too bright. The host, polished, kind smile, the kind of person who made audiences feel safe, greeted her warmly. But behind that smile was curiosity, and behind curiosity was hunger. The hunger for a story that would pull in numbers, ratings, validation. "Sarah, thank you for being here," the host began. "Millions have seen the video of you standing up to workplace harassment, but not everyone knows your background. Can you tell us about your time as a Navy SEAL?" Sarah breathed in, held it for a second, and released it slowly. The cameras stared like rifles. "I served 12 years, she said. 8 of those in special operations. It's not something I usually talk about." The host leaned forward. "Because it's classified. Because it's personal." A small smile from the audience, she continued. "People think serving in special operations is about strength, endurance, adrenaline. And yes, those matter. But what they don't tell you is that it's also about restraint. about learning to do nothing when every part of you wants to react. Her voice softened. That's what the cafeteria was for me, a moment of restraint. The host nodded. Some people online have called you a hero. Sarah's eyes lowered. I'm not a hero. Heroes don't choose their moments. They just do what's right when no one else will. The room went still for a second, and then the host's tone shifted, the way reporters do when they sense an opening. Some critics online claim that women can't serve in the SEALs, that your story doesn't add up. What do you say to them? Sarah looked up, eyes steady. I don't say anything, I let them talk. Why not respond? Wouldn't you want to set the record straight? No, she said simply. Because the people who have actually been there, they already know. And the people who don't believe it, nothing I say will change them. The silence after that was heavier than applause. The host smiled faintly, almost with respect. You have a way of making stillness powerful. Sarah almost smiled back. You learn a lot from silence, who people are, who you are. When the interview ended, she stood, shook the host's hand, and walked off set. The cameras kept rolling. She didn't look back. But behind her, the audience stood, quietly, no cheering, just a standing silence, the kind reserved not for celebrities but for soldiers. Outside, the night air felt colder than she remembered. Diana joined her on the steps of the studio. That, she said, wasn't just good, that was true. Sarah shrugged. Let's see if anyone hears it that way. They walked together through the darkened parking lot. Streetlights reflected on the wet asphalt. Somewhere far off, the low rumble of thunder hinted at a coming storm. Truth, Diana said softly, has a strange habit of surviving storms. The next morning, Sarah's phone lit up again, hundreds of messages. Most were positive, supportive, thankful. But sprinkled among them were the venomous ones, the kind that hide behind anonymity. Fake SEAL, liar. Attention seeker. If you were really one of them, you wouldn't talk about it. She read a few, then stopped. She learned long ago not to feed ghosts. Instead, she focused on the others. Messages from veterans she'd never met, from women who'd left the service and struggled to adjust, from quiet people in ordinary offices who'd written to say, "Thank you for standing your ground." Each one felt like a mission report, proof that what she was doing mattered. But even so, a part of her resisted the spotlight. Every interview, every article felt like a dissection. People wanted to study her courage as if it were something exotic. They wanted to turn her life into a headline, her choices into content. And yet, for every one person who misused her story, 10 others seemed to find themselves in it. Weeks passed, then months. And gradually, the noise settled into something like rhythm. She began working closely with Diana's organization, helping build workshops, speaking to veterans transitioning into civilian jobs, advising corporations on how to recognize the hidden strengths in their employees. At first, she resisted the idea of standing behind a podium. But when she finally did, something shifted. The first event was small, maybe 40 people in a community center. She stood at the front of the room, heart hammering harder than it ever had under fire. Public speaking was its own kind of battlefield. Her first words stumbled, she lost her place, her palms sweated. Then she saw the audience, saw the faces. Some nervous, some scarred, all searching for something real. And that's when the soldier in her took over. When I left the Navy, she began, I thought I was done with missions. But the truth is, every veteran has a mission. We just have to find out what it is when the shooting stops. The room was silent, not the awkward silence of indifference, the sacred kind, the kind that meant people were listening. She talked about the small things, the strange disorientation of civilian life, the way grocery stores felt like chaos after years of controlled operations, how ordinary people argued over things that, to her, seemed like luxuries. And then she said the words that would echo through her later speeches. Strength isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the choice to sit alone and still be okay with it. When the event ended, people lined up to thank her, not with the fawning of fans but with the sincerity of comrades. Tears, handshakes, stories shared in whispers. That night as she drove home, Sarah realized something. This connection, this purpose, felt familiar. It wasn't combat, but it was still service. She parked her car outside her apartment, leaned her head back against the seat, and closed her eyes. For the first time in years, she didn't feel like she was pretending to belong. Weeks turned to months. Her next speech was bigger, a corporate leadership conference. Then a university. Then a televised veterans summit. Each time the fear lessened, and the conviction grew. Her story wasn't about humiliation or revenge anymore. It was about awareness, dignity, empathy. About the quiet war so many fight long after the real ones are over. But not everyone understood. Some journalists began digging deeper. They wanted details, names, dates, classified operations. They called it fact-checking. Sarah called it something else, intrusion. One article ran a headline that read, "Ex-SEAL motivational speaker refuses to verify service record." It went viral for all the wrong reasons. The backlash returned. Suddenly, strangers online were dissecting her identity like a rumor. Some even demanded government proof. Sarah ignored it until one afternoon, her old secure phone rang again. "Martinez," Admiral Rebecca's voice said, firm as ever, "you've made quite an impression." "Bad one or good one?" Sarah asked dryly. "Both," the Admiral replied. "Depends who you ask. Some people think you're a liability. Others think you're the face of the modern veteran. Personally, I think you're exactly where you're meant to be." "I didn't ask for this." "No one ever does," Rebecca said. "But you're handling it, that's what matters." Sarah hesitated. What happens when people start doubting everything? The Admiral's voice softened. "Then you let your actions prove what words can't. You've done that before. You can do it again." The line went silent for a few seconds before she added, "Sarah, listen to me. You're doing more for this country right now than you did in the field. Keep going." Sarah blinked hard, holding back something she didn't want to call emotion. "Thank you, Admiral." "Don't thank me, just don't stop." When the call ended, Sarah stood by her window again, the same view of the city that once made her feel small. Now it looked different, not a maze, a map. She picked up her notepad from the desk, pages filled with scribbled notes, fragments of speeches, quotes from the people she'd met. One line stood out, underlined twice in blue ink. "Sometimes the hardest battles are fought in the quiet rooms where no one's watching." She smiled faintly. "Yeah," she whispered, "that one feels right." A month later, she received an invitation to speak at Georgetown University, her largest event yet. Hundreds expected. Cameras, press, veterans, CEOs. Diana called it a milestone. Sarah called it a test. As she stood backstage that night, waiting to walk out, she remembered the cafeteria, the sound of laughter, the weight of silence, the moment her old life collided with the new. She closed her eyes. In her mind, she saw the faces of her old team, Marcus, Rodriguez, all of them. She could almost hear Marcus's voice again. "You didn't plan it, but you made a difference." The stage manager gave the signal. The lights dimmed. Sarah stepped into the glow. The applause was immediate but brief, respectful. She walked to the podium, adjusted the microphone, and looked out at the sea of faces. Then she spoke. "When I walked into a company cafeteria 6 months ago," she said, "I didn't think I was walking into history. I thought I was just going to eat a sandwich." A ripple of soft laughter. Then silence. "I used to live by mission briefings, objectives, tactics, contingencies. But no one ever trained me for the kind of mission that starts with humiliation and ends with headlines. I learned something that day. You don't always get to choose your battles, but you can always choose your dignity. Her voice steadied as she continued. Strength isn't measured by how loud you are or how many people fear you. Sometimes it's the quiet conviction to stand your ground when no one's standing with you. She paused, looked out at the crowd, saw faces young, old, scarred, hopeful. I thought my military service was over, she said. Turns out, service takes many forms. Sometimes it means defending a nation. Sometimes it means defending your own peace. The room was utterly still. And for a brief, beautiful moment, Sarah Martinez, the woman who once just wanted to blend in, stood at the center of the world's attention, not as a soldier, not as a symbol, but as something rarer. A survivor who'd learned that silence, when wielded with purpose, could move mountains. They called it the Georgetown speech. Within 24 hours, the video had reached 3 million views. Clips of Sarah's words spread like fire through digital corridors, spliced into motivational reels, podcasts, military forums, news commentaries. And for a brief moment, it seemed like the world finally understood what she'd been trying to say. But understanding, like fame, rarely lasts long. By the end of the week, new headlines began to surface. Ex-SEAL turned speaker, fact or fiction. Government records show no female SEALs in her service year. Sarah Martinez, inspiration or imposter. It started small, a whisper here, a skeptical post there. Then it snowballed. Suddenly, Sarah's name wasn't just a symbol of courage. It was an open debate. Talk shows questioned her. Podcasts mocked her. A well-known journalist even dedicated a whole segment to debunking the myth of the female SEAL. They played her Georgetown clip on repeat, splicing it with doubt, speculation, and laughter. And just like that, the respect she had earned began to fracture. When the first wave of attacks hit, Diana called immediately. "Don't answer them," she said firmly. "You owe no one your records. You signed your life to the Navy. They sealed your files for a reason." Sarah listened in silence. "They're using you for views," Diana continued. "It'll blow over, it always does." But Sarah wasn't so sure. She lived long enough to know that in modern warfare, digital or otherwise, perception was a weapon. And once it turned against you, it cut deeper than any blade. A few nights later, she sat alone in her apartment, watching the news in disbelief. A panel of military experts debated her existence like she was a theory. One of them, an older man with medals pinned to his chest, said coldly, "If she was really a SEAL, she'd have verification. There's no record of her. None. I think she's a fraud." Sarah muted the TV. The room filled with silence. She'd faced insurgents with rifles and survived nights of waiting under mortar fire, but this was different. This was an attack she couldn't see, couldn't predict, couldn't counter without revealing secrets she'd sworn to protect. The irony wasn't lost on her. She risked her life to defend the very freedom now being used to tear her down. Her phone buzzed again. "Marcus." She answered, "You've seen it." "Yeah," his voice was low. "I've seen it, the whole damn circus." "I should have expected this," she said quietly. No one expects betrayal from the country they served. There was a long pause between them, the kind that felt like a shared wound. Marcus finally spoke. "Some of the old team's been talking. We're thinking of stepping in." "Don't," she said immediately. "Sarah." "No," her tone was sharp, controlled. "You think I want them dragged into this. You're still active. Rodriguez is still in government security. You go public, you put yourselves at risk. I won't be the reason for that." "You're not the reason," he argued. "They are." She exhaled shakily. "It doesn't matter. Let them say what they want." "Since when do you let lies win?" "Since telling the truth could hurt people I care about." Marcus didn't reply, but she could hear the restraint in his silence, that same discipline they'd all been trained to follow. Then finally, he said softly, "You taught us something in the field, remember. That silence isn't surrender, but don't confuse it with fear." And before she could answer, he hung up. The next morning, her inbox was flooded again. But this time, not with praise, with hate. "Liar. You're stealing valor. People died to earn what you're pretending to be. You're an insult to the uniform." Each message hit like a small, precise bullet. Not fatal, but cumulative. Her building's security guard stopped her that afternoon, voice uneasy. "Ma'am, there's been reporters at the front gate all morning. Some guy even tried to slip into the garage." Sarah nodded. "Thank you, don't let anyone in." She went upstairs, locked her door, and sat in the dark. It was strange, how fast the world could turn a hero into a ghost. 3 days later, a letter arrived. Not an email, not a message, a real envelope handwritten. The return address caught her eye immediately: Naval Special Warfare Command. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside, one line stood out in bold: "You are not authorized to disclose or confirm details of your service history in public communications." Below it, a single signature: Admiral Rebecca Martinez. She stared at the paper for a long time. It wasn't reprimand. It was protection, official cover for her silence. But to the world, it would look like guilt. She called Rebecca that night. "You know what this looks like, right?" she asked. "I know," the Admiral replied calmly, "but this keeps you and others safe. You went places that don't exist on paper. You did things that never happened. If they open those files, they open everything. So I stay quiet and let them destroy my name." Rebecca sighed. "You can survive this. You've survived worse. The truth has its own clock, Sarah. Let it run." Sarah wanted to believe her, but the truth, her truth, felt like a luxury she no longer had. The days that followed blurred together. Work emails piled up. Event invitations froze. Even Diana grew quiet, overwhelmed by the chaos. One evening, Sarah left the city. No announcement, no escort, just her in her car, driving until the skyline faded behind her. She ended up 3 hours north, in a small coastal town she used to visit after deployments. There was a cliff there, steep, jagged, overlooking an endless horizon of gray-blue sea. It had been her sanctuary once. Now it was her confessional. She stood at the edge, wind tugging at her jacket, eyes on the water. In the distance, she could almost see the silhouettes of old missions, memories rising like ghosts. The sandstorms of Kandahar, the freezing surf of Coronado, the faces of teammates lost in the dark. And suddenly, the noise of the world didn't matter. The headlines, the accusations, the doubt, none of it reached this place. She closed her eyes and whispered, "You know the truth, that's enough." For a long while, she stayed like that, breathing in the ocean's rhythm, grounding herself in something that didn't care who she was or what they said. When she drove back the next morning, her phone was full of missed calls. Diana Marcus, unknown numbers. And one message that made her stop cold. It was from an old name, one she hadn't seen since before she left the Navy. From LT, Daniel Pierce. "They're trying to rewrite you, Sarah. I have something you'll want to see." Her pulse quickened. Pierce had been her team's logistics officer, meticulous, quiet, the kind of man who kept copies of everything. She replied immediately. "Meet." The answer came within seconds. "Same place, you'll remember it." That night she drove again. A dimly lit diner on the outskirts of town. Same red neon sign flickering like it had years ago. When she walked in, Pierce was already there, older, gray in his beard, eyes still sharp. "Didn't think I'd see you again," she said, sliding into the booth. "Didn't think I'd need to call," he replied. He pulled out a small USB drive, placed it on the table between them. "Before the team was disbanded, I archived every after-action summary, every commendation. Officially, they were destroyed, but I'm not great at letting history vanish. Sarah stared at the drive. You kept them. I kept us, he said simply, and now they might keep you. Her throat tightened. If you send that anywhere. I know, he interrupted. That's why I'm not giving it to anyone but you. You decide what to do with it. She looked down at the small black drive, tiny, unassuming, yet heavy with the weight of her past. It was proof, validation, redemption, but also a key that could unlock secrets meant to stay buried. Pierce studied her face. You could end this tomorrow, prove them all wrong. Sarah's eyes met his. And what would that prove? That I can betray the oath I took for a little public mercy. He leaned back. You'd be telling the truth. She shook her head. Some truths aren't mine to tell. They sat in silence for a while, two soldiers stranded in peacetime, carrying ghosts that refused to rest. Finally, she slid the drive back toward him. Keep it, she said. If I ever need it, I'll find you. Pierce nodded, eyes soft. You always were the quiet kind of brave. As she stood to leave, he said one more thing. Sarah, you may have lost the narrative, but you haven't lost the reason you started. She paused, and what reason is that? To remind the world that dignity doesn't shout. Back in her car, the city lights flickered faintly on the horizon. Her phone buzzed again, messages still coming in, accusations still multiplying. But for the first time in weeks, she didn't care. She made peace with the storm. Because storms, she realized, don't erase mountains, they reveal which ones are real. As she drove home, the radio played an old military hymn. And for a fleeting moment, Sarah Martinez, the woman accused, the soldier questioned, the voice misunderstood, smiled. Because she finally understood something she hadn't before. You don't need everyone to believe your truth. You just need to live it loud enough that silence can't kill it. Every soldier knows the silence after battle. It's not peace, not really. It's the echo, the heavy stillness that follows chaos, when you realize the world kept turning while you were fighting to stay alive. For Sarah Martinez, that silence returned again. Not the calm of healing, but the hollow quiet of being misunderstood. A week after she'd turned down Pierce's proof, the media storm began to lose its appetite. New controversies replaced her name. New scandals drew the spotlight away. But the damage had already been done. Her reputation was fractured. Half of the world admired her, the other half doubted her. And Sarah, she stood somewhere in between, carrying both admiration and accusation like twin weights on her shoulders. Diana visited one evening. She brought takeout and tired eyes. You've been quiet, she said softly, setting the bag on the table. Too quiet. Sarah smiled faintly. Isn't that what I'm good at? Not anymore, Diana said. People still listen when you speak. You should use that. I already did. Look how that turned out. Diana sighed. You can't measure impact by headlines. The truth lives longer than the news cycle. Sarah looked at her for a long moment, then said, You sound like the Admiral. Maybe she's right. They ate in silence for a while. Outside, the city pulsed faintly. Cars, sirens, the hum of life moving forward without permission. Then Diana spoke again. There's a conference next month, the Global Veterans Leadership Summit. They want you to open it. Sarah's fork paused midair. Why me? Because you're the only one who's not selling a brand. You speak like someone who's seen both sides, the war and what comes after. I told you, I'm done with stages. Diana leaned forward, voice calm but firm. You said that before Georgetown, and look what happened. That's exactly why I'm hesitant. Sarah, Diana said gently, you don't owe anyone explanations, but you do owe yourself closure. You can't spend the rest of your life defending your silence. Sarah stared at her for a long moment. And what would I even say? Tell them the truth, Diana said. Not about your missions, about you. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. The words echoed in her mind, "Tell them the truth." She turned off the lights, but the room didn't feel dark enough. Her thoughts flickered like static memories of her old team, the faces of those who hadn't made it back, the whispers of strangers online calling her a liar. Finally, she got up and walked to her balcony. The air was cold. The city stretched out below, indifferent, endless. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled again, always the sound of something coming. She whispered to no one, "You wanted peace, but maybe peace isn't quiet. Maybe it's the courage to speak softly when the world demands you shout." The decision came slowly but surely. She would speak again, not to defend, not to fight, but to define. Not who she was, but what she believed. The Global Veterans Summit was held in Chicago that year. Grand ballroom, cameras, flags from a dozen countries. People in suits, people in uniforms, people in between, the walking proof that wars don't end when the headlines do. When Sarah arrived, she was met with the usual mixture of awe and scrutiny. Reporters whispered, veterans nodded quietly, and somewhere in the back, skeptics waited to pick apart her every word. Diana met her backstage, nervous. "Always," Sarah said. "That's good," Diana replied. "Means you still care." Sarah smiled faintly, then she stepped toward the stage. The lights dimmed, the crowd hushed. Sarah walked to the podium, her boots clicking softly on the polished floor. No fanfare, no introduction, just her standing in front of thousands. She took a breath. "When people think of soldiers," she began, "they think of strength, of certainty, of people who always know what to do." She paused, letting the silence settle. But the truth is, strength isn't the absence of fear. It's learning to walk with it. The audience leaned in. She could feel it, the pulse of attention, the quiet hunger for something real. "When I left the Navy," she continued, "I thought I could start over. I thought the hardest part was behind me. But no one tells you that sometimes coming home is its own kind of battle." A few heads nodded in the crowd. Veterans, families, survivors. Sarah went on, her voice calm but carrying weight. "They tell you to move on, get a job, blend in. But how do you blend in after seeing what people shouldn't see, after living in a world where silence saves lives?" She looked out at the rows of faces. "The truth is, I didn't want attention. The video, the headlines, none of that was planned. I just wanted to eat my lunch in peace. But peace, I've learned, isn't given. It's chosen, over and over again." A murmur spread through the room, not applause, understanding. Sarah took another breath. "They asked me once if I was really a SEAL, if I could prove it. But what they didn't understand is I never needed to, because proof isn't always a piece of paper. Sometimes it's scars, sometimes it's silence, and sometimes it's how you carry yourself when no one believes you." The camera zoomed in, her expression steady, eyes reflecting both pride and ache. "I've met heroes who never wore uniforms, mothers who raised sons through deployments, medics who carried men heavier than themselves through fire, people who wake up every day and fight battles no one sees." She paused, her voice dropped lower, softer, intimate. "So if you take one thing from me today, take this. You don't need permission to be strong. You don't need recognition to have value. You just need to stand, even if no one claps." The room was silent. Then slow, deliberate applause began. Not the thunderous kind that fills arenas, but the quiet, sustained kind that carries reverence. Diana stood near the back, eyes shining. The admiral, watching from home, whispered to her empty office, "Ata girl." After the speech, Sarah slipped away from the crowd. She didn't linger for interviews or praise. She found a quiet hallway, sat down on a bench, and exhaled for what felt like the first time in months. Marcus called that night. "I watched," he said. "You were exactly who you've always been." "Exhausted," she teased lightly. "Authentic," he said, "and brave. You turned their doubt into grace." Sarah smiled faintly. Grace isn't easy. Neither is war, Marcus said, and you've fought both. They didn't talk much after that. They didn't need to. The silence between them was its own language, the kind forged in fire and loyalty. Weeks passed, the world moved again. But something had shifted. The storm that had once defined her began to lose its grip. The accusations faded, the critics turned elsewhere, and the people who'd once doubted started to listen, not because she'd proven anything, but because she hadn't needed to. Diana's organization grew rapidly. Companies began inviting veterans to leadership programs. Schools started outreach initiatives inspired by her speeches. A quiet movement had begun, not built on noise, but on empathy. They called it the Still Strength Project. And though Sarah refused to take credit, everyone knew whose silence had started it. One evening, months later, Sarah found herself back at the same cliff she'd once stood on during the darkest week of the storm. The ocean below was calmer now, the waves soft, rhythmic. She stood there with her hands in her jacket pockets, eyes on the horizon. Diana's voice echoed in her mind. You can't spend the rest of your life defending your silence. She smiled faintly. No, she whispered, but I can live with it. Behind her, footsteps approached, slow, familiar. She turned. Marcus, he looked older, more tired, but still carried that same quiet steadiness. You still come here, he said, stopping beside her. Some places don't stop calling. He looked out at the ocean. They talk about you, you know, the silent seal, the woman who stood her ground. I didn't do it for that, she said softly. I know, he said, that's why it worked. They stood there in silence, two soldiers watching the sunset, two ghosts of a war long past. After a while, Marcus spoke again. Do you ever miss it? The missions? The purpose? Sarah thought about it. Then she said, no, not anymore. I just found a different one. Marcus nodded slowly. Yeah, you did. The sky deepened into shades of gold and violet. The wind carried the faint smell of salt and memory. Sarah closed her eyes, breathing it in. Later that night, as she drove back, her phone vibrated with a new message. Unknown number again. She opened it, a single sentence from someone she didn't know. Your words kept me from giving up tonight. Thank you. She stared at the message for a long moment. Then she whispered, almost to herself, then it was worth it. Because sometimes redemption doesn't come through headlines or applause. Sometimes it comes quietly, through one unseen life that decides to keep going because of yours. That night, Sarah wrote in her journal, a habit she'd picked up again after years of silence. She wrote about strength, not as a show of power, but as the art of staying kind in a cruel world. She wrote about dignity, about restraint, about how some wars never end, they just change shape. And when she finished, she closed the notebook and said softly into the stillness of her apartment, sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. She smiled just slightly, the kind of smile only peace can give. Fame fades, but influence, that lingers like a shadow you can't outrun. Months had passed since the summit. The storm around Sarah had quieted, leaving behind something new, not noise, not fame, but resonance. Her name wasn't trending anymore. Her words were. Quotes from her speeches appeared on posters, in schools, even tattooed on the arms of young veterans who'd never met her. You don't need recognition to have value. Silence can be stronger than shouting. Stand even if no one claps. Those lines, written in quiet reflection, had become mantras for people she'd never meet. But with recognition came the one thing she had spent years trying to avoid: visibility. Requests flooded in from across the world, United Nations panels, NATO conferences, documentaries. She declined most. Still, her presence seemed to grow without her. Diana called it the ripple effect. Sarah called it the echo of something I never planned. And yet in the quiet corners of her apartment, sometimes, when the city lights dimmed and the world outside fell still, she felt something else stirring beneath the calm. A pull. Not from fame. From the past. One evening, while sorting through correspondence, she came across a plain white envelope. No return address. Inside, a single photograph. It showed 6 people, her old unit. Bravo team. Dust-streaked faces, camouflage uniforms, eyes tired but alive. And in the corner, scrawled in pen, "We never forgot, neither should you." Her fingers froze on the edge of the photo. Her chest tightened, a flood of memories she'd sealed away long ago rushing back in color and sound. She flipped the photo over. On the back, another line, "You're not the only one they tried to erase." No signature. That night, Sarah couldn't sleep. Every sound felt amplified, the hum of her refrigerator, the distant sirens, her own heartbeat. Her mind replayed old scenes. The heat of Kandahar, the sharp sting of sand in her eyes, the night they'd lost their medic, Jordan HALE, in a failed extraction. She remembered the report, the confusion, the silence that followed. And then the orders. Forget, move on, mission never happened. Her eyes burned. She whispered into the dark, "Why now?" The phone buzzed on her nightstand. "Marcus." She answered immediately. "Did you send it?" "Send what?" "The photo, the message." There was a pause. "No," he said carefully. "What message?" Sarah told him. When she finished, Marcus exhaled slowly. "Then it's starting again." "What is?" "The cleaning up," he said. "Someone must have started digging, maybe because of all the noise around you." Sarah's pulse quickened. "You think they're watching me?" "I think they never stopped." She stood, packing the room. "Then this photo is a warning." "Or a reminder," Marcus said, "that the truth isn't buried, just waiting." Sarah's mind raced. "You're not the only one they tried to erase." "Who else?" What else had been rewritten? "Marcus," she said, "I need to find out who sent it." He hesitated. "You sure you want to do that? You've built something good. You open that door again, you don't control what walks through." "I never did," she said quietly, "but I can't live wondering." "Then let me help." "No," she said, "not this time. If it's a warning, I'll face it alone." The next morning she drove out of the city. No plan, no destination, just a direction. West, toward the coast. She stopped in a small town 2 hours away. Checked into a quiet motel under a name she hadn't used in years. The one from her active service records. She left her phone behind. Just her, the road, and the question that wouldn't leave her alone. Why now? That night, as rain tapped against the motel window, she opened her laptop and connected to an old encrypted channel, one only her former unit would remember. The interface flickered to life, asking for credentials she hadn't typed in a decade. When it loaded, one message was already waiting. Timestamp 0314 hours, sender unknown. "You're not safe in the open. HALE's file was reopened. Someone's rewriting Bravo history." Sarah's throat went dry. Jordan HALE, their medic, presumed killed during a blackout mission, the one that haunted her most. She remembered his last words over the comms before the explosion. "Go, I've got this." And then silence. She whispered to herself, "You died, didn't you?" Unless he hadn't. The next day, Sarah returned to the city. She called Admiral Rebecca. "Tell me the truth," she said without greeting. "Was HALE's file reopened?" A pause, paper shuffling, then the Admiral's voice cautious. "Where did you hear that?" "I got a message, a photo. Someone's trying to reach me." "Sarah, is he alive?" The silence on the other end said everything. Finally, Rebecca exhaled. "There are things I can't confirm over a call." "That's not a no." "It's not a yes either," Rebecca said softly. Some files resurface when they shouldn't. If you're smart, you'll stay out of it. I can't. I know, the Admiral said. You never could. For the next week, Sarah's world shifted again, subtly but unmistakably. Cars lingered too long outside her apartment. Emails disappeared from her inbox. Her phone buzzed at odd hours, only to go silent when she answered. The shadow world she'd escaped was awake again, watching. Diana noticed the change immediately. You're distant, she said one evening. Something's wrong. Sarah hesitated. Then, for the first time, she told her everything, the letter, the photo, the possibility that one of her teammates might still be alive. Diana listened without interruption. When Sarah finished, she said quietly, "If it's true, what will you do?" Sarah looked out the window. "What I always do." "Which is?" "Finish what was started." Diana reached across the table, her voice steady. "You don't have to face this alone." Sarah gave her a faint, tired smile. "I appreciate that, but some ghosts don't follow crowds." 2 nights later, another message came, this time from a secure number. "Meet me where it ended. J." She knew instantly what it meant. Bagram Airfield. The last base they'd deployed from before that mission. The one that had erased half their team from history. She stared at the message for a long time. Then she began to pack. The flight to Kabul was long, quiet and heavy with memory. Each hour peeled away layers of her new life, until she felt the old one pressing back through the cracks, the rhythm of a soldier's breathing, the instinct to scan every shadow, the way her heartbeat synced with engine hums. When she landed, the air smelled of dust and fuel, the same scent that had lived in her lungs for years. She wasn't supposed to be there. But rules had never stopped her before. At the outskirts of the old base, now mostly abandoned, she found a small group of Afghan locals maintaining the perimeter. They recognized the insignia on her old ID tag. They let her through. The place was a graveyard of echoes. Empty hangars, silent runways, rusted vehicles under the unforgiving sun. And then near the old operations tent, she saw it, a small marker, stone worn smooth. Carved initials, J.H. Jordan HALE. She knelt down, tracing the letters with her fingers. "Was it you who sent that photo?" she whispered. The wind answered with nothing but dust. Suddenly, footsteps behind her. A voice older, rougher but familiar. "Took you long enough." She turned. And there he was. Jordan HALE, alive. He looked different, beard streaked with gray, one arm in a sling, but those same steady eyes. The eyes that had once held the calm of a man who ran into chaos, so others didn't have to. Sarah's throat closed. I watched you die." "Not quite," he said. "They let me, easier that way." "Why?" He smiled faintly. "Because sometimes survival makes you inconvenient." Her knees felt weak. "All this time you were alive." "Alive, a strong word," he said softly. "Existing's closer." He gestured for her to walk. They moved toward the old hangar, their boots crunching on gravel. "They buried me on paper," he said. "New identity, new silence, but I kept watching. I saw your video, the speech. You woke people up, Sarah, even the ones trying to stay asleep." She looked at him. "So why now?" "Because they're rewriting everything," he said. "Our missions, our names, the people who died. Soon it'll be like we never existed." "Who's behind it?" He looked out toward the horizon, jaw tight. "The same ones who profited from it. You know how it goes." "And you think I can stop them?" He turned to her, expression unreadable. "You already started. You think your speeches are just inspiration. You're scaring the right people. They don't want the world remembering what quiet soldiers can do." Sarah was silent. "Help me expose it," he said. "One last mission, not with guns, with truth." She stared at him, her pulse steady but deep. Every instinct screamed that stepping into this, would destroy the peace she'd finally found. But her heart, the soldier still inside, whispered something else. Maybe peace isn't the absence of battle. Maybe it's fighting the right one. She met his eyes. I'm in. That night, in the remains of an old command tent, they laid out maps and old encrypted drives. The mission began to take shape, not to erase history this time, but to reclaim it. Two ghosts, preparing to remind the world that silence, when broken, can be louder than war. And somewhere beyond the horizon, the wind carried a faint sound, not of combat but of purpose returning. Some truths don't die. They wait, buried beneath headlines, hidden behind seals and signatures, until someone brave enough digs them out. Sarah Martinez never thought she'd be that someone again. She left the battlefield behind. But here she was, in a half-collapsed hangar under the Afghan sun, planning a mission that could cost her the quiet life she'd fought so hard to build. Across from her sat Jordan Hale, the medic she'd once mourned. Alive, changed, carrying years of exile in the lines of his face. He spread out the old maps, his one good hand tracing the routes they both knew by memory. The files are stored in a private server under a defense contractor in D.C., he said. They rewrote our ops to hide what went wrong, erased names, moved money, buried bodies. They called it logistics error. I call it betrayal. Sarah listened in silence. The hum of desert wind filled the pauses. Hale looked up. You sure you want to do this? You've built something good. You speak for peace now. She met his eyes. Peace built on lies isn't peace, it's paralysis. He nodded slowly. Then we do it clean. They returned to the States quietly. Separate flights, burner phones, no paper trail. Sarah felt the old rhythm settling back into her bones. Calculated caution, mental checklists, exits mapped in advance. But beneath it all was something new: conscience. Not revenge, not duty, something deeper. Truth. In a safe house on the outskirts of Virginia, Hale showed her what he'd gathered: fragmented data drives, old mission logs, photos that were never meant to exist. Among them, one image froze Sarah cold. It was of a child, Afghan, no more than 12, standing beside a collapsed building. In the original report, that mission was labeled clean. No civilian casualties. But Hale's photo said otherwise. Sarah's throat tightened. This was the one they buried. He nodded. You took the blame, remember, indirectly. They called it tactical miscommunication. Then they wiped Bravo's record clean to keep contracts alive. She stared at the screen, heart heavy. So all this time, they erased us to protect a lie. Exactly. He leaned back, weary but resolute. If we publish this, it won't just expose them. It'll expose us. Everything: names, units, operations. Sarah was silent for a long time. Then she said softly, then we make sure what's exposed saves more than it destroys. For days they worked in near darkness, gathering, encrypting, cross-checking. The plan wasn't to leak everything, just enough to reveal the truth without burning the innocent. Diana called during that week, unaware of where Sarah really was. You disappeared again, she said. Should I be worried? Sarah hesitated. Not yet. You sound different. Maybe I finally stopped running. From what? From myself. Diana paused. Whatever you're doing, be careful. I will, Sarah said. And for the first time, she meant it. The night they were ready, the storm broke, literal and metaphorical. Rain lashed against the windows. Thunder rolled like distant artillery. Sarah sat in front of the terminal, the upload link glowing on screen. Send to Global Press Consortium, VERIFIED secure channel. Hale stood behind her. Once you click that, there's no going back. She turned, studied him, the friend she'd lost, the ghost she'd found again. Then it's about time. We stop pretending we're already gone. He smiled faintly. You always did know how to end things. Sarah looked back at the screen. The cursor blinked, waiting. Then she whispered, "For the ones who can't speak," and pressed send. The file bar filled slowly, 10%, 40, 70, 100. And just like that, the truth was free. By dawn, the world had changed. News outlets across continents lit up with headlines. Leaked files reveal cover-up in covert operations. Erased soldiers resurface, hidden civilian casualties exposed. Government contractors accused of altering military records. The names of Bravo team were blurred out. But the photo of Sarah from her Georgetown speech appeared beside every article. Within hours, her inbox overflowed. Some messages were grateful, others venomous. But beneath the noise was something undeniable. The world was listening. Hale watched the coverage silently. "They'll come for us." Sarah nodded. "Maybe, but at least now they'll have to look us in the eye when they do." 2 days later, Admiral Rebecca called. "I told you the truth had its own clock," she said quietly. "Looks like it finally rang." Sarah sighed. "You knew, didn't you?" "I suspected. We all did. Some of us tried to fight it from inside, but politics eats honesty for breakfast. I didn't do this to start a war." "You didn't," Rebecca said. "You ended one the wrong kind." A pause, then the Admiral's voice softened. "What will you do now?" Sarah looked out the window. The sky was clearing. "What I've always done." "Which is?" "Serve." The backlash came swiftly. Investigations, hearings, politicians scrambling to distance themselves. But something remarkable happened too. Civilians listened. Veterans spoke. Whistleblowers stepped forward. For every voice of condemnation, there were 10 of courage. Diana visited her one evening, standing in Sarah's doorway with quiet awe. "You know what people are calling this," she said. "The silent operation. They're saying it changed how veterans are treated, how accountability is seen." Sarah smiled faintly. "Irony suits history, doesn't it? Some are calling you a traitor, others a savior." Sarah looked down. "I'm neither. I'm just tired of pretending truth needs permission." Weeks passed. The hearings concluded. Names were cleared. Families received recognition. And though the machine of government turned slowly, it turned because someone had dared to press send. But peace, Sarah knew, doesn't come wrapped in medals. It comes quietly in small mercies. Like the letter she received one afternoon, handwritten, no signature. "I was one of the soldiers on the ground that day. My son didn't make it home, but knowing you told the truth means I can finally stop wondering. Thank you for giving him back to history." She held the letter for a long time, tears blurring the ink. Then she folded it neatly, placed it beside the photograph of Bravo team. Months later, Sarah visited Jordan Hale's new resting place, real this time. He'd succumbed to complications from the injuries he'd carried for years. He died peacefully, 2 weeks after the truth broke. The marker was simple: Jordan Hale, medic, friend, silence broken. Sarah knelt beside it, fingers brushing the stone. "He'd be proud of you," Diana had said earlier that week. But standing there, Sarah realized pride wasn't the point. Truth was. She placed a single seal trident on the soil and whispered, "Rest easy, Doc. Mission accomplished." The wind carried the words across the hillside, soft and steady, the kind of sound that lives longer than echo. That evening back home, Sarah sat by her window, the same view she'd once stared at in doubt, now a reminder of what endurance looks like. The city below shimmered in gold and blue. She poured herself tea, opened her journal, and began to write again. "We spend our lives searching for peace," she wrote, "but peace isn't found in silence. It's found in the courage to face what silence hides. Maybe strength isn't winning the war. Maybe it's surviving the aftermath without losing your humanity." She paused, listening to the quiet hum of night. And then she wrote the final words that would one day be carved beneath her name. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak, it simply acts. She closed the notebook. Outside, rain began again, gentle this time like a benediction. Sarah leaned back, eyes closing, letting the sound wash through the room. Somewhere far away, the world was still arguing about what she'd done. But in this small, silent space, she finally knew peace, not the fragile kind that hides from truth, but the lasting kind that's built from it.